So many small business owners are doing everything right to systemize their business, and yet they're trapped. It doesn't matter if they've written standard operating procedures, set up project management tools, or hired A players, nothing can get done without their direct direction. And after analyzing behind the scenes operating data from over 4,000 small businesses, yes, really, I think I know how we can fix it. You see, to get more done without just throwing more people at the problem and hoping that fixes things, we need 3 ingredients. Number 1, we need clear tasks. We need to know what actually do we need to work on. Pretty obvious, right? But also, number 2, we need accountability. We need to know that if we are going to do something and we say we're going to do it, we're actually going to be held to account, required to answer for and make sure we actually fulfill those promises, whether we're a team of 1 or a team of 100. Also, number 3, we need prioritization. So we've got stuff we need to do. We know we are going to have to answer for whether or not we do it, but how important is it really? Having a clear priority system to say, hey, this is really important, this doesn't matter, is our 3rd key ingredient of actually getting things done without hiring more people. But the thing is, from this behind the scenes data, we found that based on the 175,000 data points I've looked at, teams aren't actually doing this. They're missing all 3 or at least a handful of these key ingredients for execution. And so they have a team that wants to do great things. They have a leader who's excited about the future, and yet they cannot execute. To paint the picture, I've actually whipped up this quick chart to show you what happens when we start missing some of these ingredients. For example, if we miss prioritization, meaning we know we need to do something and we don't forget about it, but we're not really sure how important it is, we end up with tasks that exist and we just delay them and delay them and delay them. It's like, oh yeah, Layla should really write her book, but we don't really know how important it is. So we think about it, it takes up our mental bandwidth, but we never actually make progress, which I'm sure many of us can relate to. Number 2 is if we are missing our accountability. We say we're going to do something, we know it's important, but we never actually hold ourselves to account to make it happen. This usually happens when we make verbal promises or just don't record things. And so we say, yeah, I should make sure I write that book. It is super important. And then we go on with our day. And we think about what we're having for dinner, when to pick the kids up from school, and all of a sudden we can't even remember the fact that we made that commitment to write the book. Missing this accountability component leads to forgotten tasks and having to nag and remind people in order to get things done, which is exhausting for any operator. Finally, if you're not even sure what the task is, if you feel like you're being held to account to accomplish a goal, maybe because you have metrics in place, and you know it is important, but you're not actually sure what you should be doing, that is perhaps the most common and painful position of all, because when you're in that arena, you are fighting stress. In fact, I have a little sticker for this one. You have pressure without direction. That's kind of one of my personal mantras around here. Stress is pressure without direction. When you know you need to be doing everything, oh my God, it's all so important, but you don't know what concrete actions you need to do to move a project forward or to cover for the bosses out of office, that is stressful. And that's what we want to be able to fix. Now, when we work with people here at ProcessDriven, we actually help them work through all of these pieces. But if you're in more of a DIY phase, I'm going to go through how we can fix each of these areas of failed execution one by one. To build our Get Shit Done engine, we need to start off by clarifying our tasks. We need to be clear what we are actually doing, which sounds so basic, but based on the data we have looked at, this is not nearly as common as you think. In fact, when we dug into the data, we realized only 24.8% of people had recorded responsibilities for their team. Only 17.8% recorded any ideas, and only 21% took the time to write down major issues and emergencies that were happening in their company. In other words, when things needed to get done, let's say about 80% of people did not write it down at all. And clearly, this is going to introduce some inefficiencies because what you say may not be the same as what I hear, let alone what I remember to actually do. What we'll often see in teams where all of the task communication is happening verbally is there's going to be misunderstandings. I'm going to think you needed the report by Friday, but you actually needed the report by Thursday, and I didn't understand what you meant by right away. What's going to end up happening is there's going to be this pressure and misunderstanding and assumptions that result in, you guessed it, stress, which is what happens when we have unclear expectations of what actions actually need to be done. So the solution for this one is actually really simple. start writing down your tasks. So that way I don't have to read inside your brain to know what you meant. Actually write down what you're asking for me to do. Now, I should point out, most teams, even when they try to write down their tasks, they do so in such a vague way, it's not that helpful. But I have a whole other video and another reference chart up above this video that goes through how to create tasks properly in case you're part of the majority of teams that don't quite know what this even means. So open that in another tab and let's move on to accountability. So our next step after we get clear of what we need to do is holding people accountable to do it, because you can't hold someone accountable for something they misunderstood, right? So do these in order. When it comes to accountability, we want to make sure that when we commit to action, we are held to account. We are reminded and need to answer for whether or not something got done. Based on the 4,000 small teams we surveyed and analyzed here at ProcessDriven, over 50% of small teams do not have some kind of simple accountability system. The only way they know what is being worked on or what's falling behind is by having a one-on-one conversation with person, which is not only very time consuming because you have to have a ton of meetings for no real productive output, and also it's not the most trustworthy because if you're asking people, hey, what's the status on that? That's assuming they're going to remember to be asked and they're going to remember what the status is. And if you haven't caught a trend here, memorization along this journey is not going to be a recipe for success. So instead of having your 30th meeting of the week to just get a status update on something, the solution for this accountability piece is simple. One task list. That's it. If you're in person, this could be as simple as a whiteboard, a clipboard, or a notebook where you write down all of your tasks. If you are digital, you could be using a Google Doc, a spreadsheet, or any of the many task management softwares. I have a whole video comparing some of my favorites up here. But what matters is that you have one spot where every promise you or your team makes is logged. And yes, I'm saying promise to mean task, because if you're committing to doing something, you are promising your future self and your colleagues, and in some cases your clients, you're going to make good on that promise. So make sure you do by recording it in one spot. This is a huge difference than where most people go with task management, which is either they put it in people's brain and then are surprised when people forget about things, or they put it on a bunch of little sticky notes all over the place and then they're surprised when you lose track of something, or they have 1,000 different tabs in different windows and then they're surprised when they lose track of something. We don't want any of that complexity. If you truly want to be held to account and make sure things get done, have one spot that you look at where you see those promises until they are done. We know from our data that the majority of teams do not do this, but please make it a practice in your team if you'd like to make sure things get done instead of forgotten. Oh, and I should say, a bonus of having this shared task list is when you have this, you can see real-time status reports on where things stand without having to have a meeting just for a status update. That's a huge time saver, and it allows you to use meetings for things that meetings are actually good for. More on that in this video up at the top. And if you're a client of ProcessDriven, we actually help you organize all of your tasks with some really fancy templates that you can just install in a few clicks. But that brings us to our third category, which is prioritization. Because if we know what we need to do, we know we're going to answer to doing what we need to do, we also need to make it clear how important is it relative to all the other things we need to juggle. Whether you're a business owner or employee, there are so many things that demand your attention every day, from the laundry to the emails to the support tickets to creating videos. All of these little pieces need to be balanced and done in a specific order. And if you don't know what order to do them in, you can end up just kicking the can down the road. Now, when we start looking at the data of how small teams are actually prioritizing, it's not so great. What we've seen across the board is that small teams have a high tendency to record things that are extraordinary, right? The special project the CEO wants to work on, the major issue that the operations leader wants to fix. Those tend to get written down in a time of crisis, but the ordinary work that a business needs to do, the ordinary work across the board is largely ignored. It goes back to the previous points of being memorized. Yet, in a small business, ordinary work should take up anywhere between 60 and 80% of any given employee's time. So 60 to 80% of your work should be fairly predictable. It's client work, it's marketing, it's the things that you know how to do. Maybe there's going to be 20% chaos or experiments, but the majority is predictable. The problem is most teams are only writing down the 10 to 20% that is chaotic and unpredictable. So what ends up happening is when the CEO comes back from a conference and says, "Oh my gosh, guys, I have the best idea. We should start a podcast," right? That is the only thing people see. And so they commit to the task, they commit to being held accountable, but they fail to remember all of the other things they need to do to keep the lights on. They need to fulfill orders to current clients. They need to answer support tickets. They need to film their normal YouTube videos. We have all of these baseline commitments that we've made in our business. And when we don't pay attention to those and we just commit to new and shiny things, we end up feeling very overwhelmed. We add too much to our plate that we can't actually do. So what ends up happening is months go by and the big shiny project doesn't really see a lot of progress. The CEO, often I'll be talking to them, they'll be getting upset. They'll be like, "Man, my team can't get anything done. We might need to hire more. These people must be lazy." All the excuses in the book. But what you don't realize is the reason progress isn't been happening is because there's not a clear priority between the things that we always need to do and this new shiny thing. We only have so much time in the day. We just can't create more. So to add this, we need to remove some of this. And that's what most business owners miss because they don't have any way of seeing what is actually happening in their business. So how do we fix this? Well, let's add on to what we've already talked about. Number one, we've got tasks. Number two, we have a list of them. To make priorities clear, put them in order. That's it. The most common way to put things in order is by using due dates. To do this, though, you need to make sure you are accurately estimating how long things take, which is not something most people are good at. If you say you're going to answer all your emails in 15 minutes on Monday and they actually take 3 hours, you're going to need to move some things around, okay? If you work with us inside Foundations, we give you some tactical strategies for making this more accurate, but that is the most common way to order that task list. The second way to do it, if you are someone who's not so good at estimating due dates, which is many people, is to use a queue system. So in a queue system, we basically just create a rule and we say, hey, in the company, we work from top to bottom of our to-do list, and we don't work on the next thing until the one above it is done. You can make some kind of little exceptions, like maybe we can have 2 in progress before we start moving on. But either way, you force yourself to work in order. It doesn't matter how many days it takes. It just needs to be done in order. So you're constantly prioritizing your to-do list and seeing all of your commitments there as you add or remove more things from the list. You can get more or less fancy with this queue system by having stars and points and different tracks and pipelines. But at the end of the day, it's just do one thing before you do the next. And that'll keep you nice and prioritized. In the case of the business owner coming back from the conference with the shiny new idea of a podcast, what we'd want to do is put those podcasting tasks in the queue and see, are they really more important than answering the support tickets and finishing the project from last time? Yes or no? And when we're starting to make those hard choices, the CEO and the team are both aligned of, oh, okay, so this is why it's going to take this long. This is what I'd have to give up to make it get done faster. Now, when we have both clear tasks, accountability, and prioritization, we are able to execute perfectly. And at the end of the day, that is the job of any team leader or team member, to take the vision and bring it to life. When we combine these 3 things, that's exactly what we build in our team without necessarily needing to throw more people at the problem. But it all starts with having a very clear definition of what a task is. Newsflash, most people are not creating tasks correctly, so watch this video to make sure your team is. And again, if you are tired of trying to trial and error your systems and you want to get all of this stuff working in your team without the guesswork, that is exactly what my team, ProcessDriven, can help you do. Link in the description below, and until next time, enjoy the process.